Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, hoping you're well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw one of the worst weekends in the entirety of 2025. And that is pretty bad, seeing that it was Halloween weekend. By the way, happy belated Halloween to everyone. It is still All Hallowtide, or Hallowtide, as we have, of course, Halloween, All Saints Day yesterday, All Souls Day today. So great opportunities for us to continue to pray for each other and pray for our lost loved ones. But this weekend, right, Halloween weekend, should have been a layup in many ways, right? Hollywood could have been putting out for this weekend, with the Halloween day specifically falling on a Friday this year. They could have put out a really cool horror film. They could have tried to take advantage of the spooky season, and instead there's just a bunch of holdovers from previous weeks. A couple of them do deal with, spooky season stuff, especially the number 2 film this weekend of Black Phone 2, but again, Hollywood dropped the ball with no major new releases, and really the only new things this weekend were the extension of the limited release of Begonia, which was added to over 2,000 screens, and then the re-release of a 40-year-old movie in Back to the Future, which broke into the top 5. Now, this is without the numbers for the other film to talk about, which is K-pop Demon Hunters, a Netflix film released earlier this year, getting a second re-release in theaters after the first sing-along version was successful. That film will actually bump out Back to the Future, but still, the fact that you have in this discussion films like K-pop Demon Hunters, films like Back to the Future, and a bunch of others too, right? There's obviously the Twilight saga that came back this weekend also from Fathom Events, and that film, luckily, not really up there as far as total numbers are concerned, but the fact that even just across all of those different releases of the movie, the film was still, again, doing much better than it probably had any right to do. It just tells us how bad Hollywood and the state of Hollywood truly is at this point in time. Now, of course, take this next number with a grain of salt, but according to my good friend Grok over on X.com, if you look at the total worst weekends for 2025, and again, do take these numbers with a grain of salt, but obviously this is working with some legitimate information. I can at the very least confirm that October 31st to November 2nd number being around that total. We're talking about the worst weekend on record was March 14th to 16th, which was the post-Oscar slump, according to Grok, as the reasoning behind it, which only had $52.1 million for the entirety of the weekend. February 7th through 9th, the pre-Valentine's Day lull was $54 million. Again, more excuses there. February 28th, $54 million. And now October 31st to 2nd, the 4th worst weekend in 2025. Now, even if you were to include, right, other numbers, right, obviously these are going to be, it'll be interesting to see exactly what the total is for the weekend when the actual numbers come out there. But even if it's off by just a little bit, we're still talking about a top 10 worst weekend of 2025. That is how bad these numbers have been. And obviously, if these numbers track downward, meaning if the adjustments for the weekend are less than what is being currently presented and being reported, this could also climb the charts, as it were, as far as worst box office weekends for 2025. And so things are really, really bad for Hollywood right now. And as of right now, the ones that are really shining are the ones that are most interesting. For one, Regretting You. This is a film that did not have a great opening weekend, and overall the box office, it's not really doing all that much. That being said, it had a very strong second weekend hold, only a 41% drop this weekend, which was actually strong enough to bring it to the number 1 spot. Now, a lot of people did not really have this movie on their bingo card of films to get a number 1 showing, at the very least in its second weekend of release. And so the fact that it was able to edge out a film like Black Phone 2, which many thought, hey, it's the most spooky of the spooky season movies that are still out, that are still relatively new, maybe that one will actually be able to, to do a little bit better because of that very reason. Now, again, keep in mind that these numbers are very close. We're talking about $100,000 difference currently between the number 1 and 2 spots. And so once those actuals come in, we'll find out if Paramount was trying to pad their numbers to have the story of the number 1 release of the weekend, or if those numbers are actually going to come in and Black Phone 2 takes the number 1 spot. Again, that could happen. When numbers are that close, that could easily happen. But even with that being the case, the fact that Regretting You dropped in the 40% range definitely goes against what most other sites had been reporting. If we go over to Box Office Theory, right, they had Black Phone 2 making upwards of $9 million with a 30% drop. Regretting You, 55% drop was currently what was being projected at the time. And then if you go over to box office report, they also had Black Phone 2 in the number 1 spot, and then had K-pop Demon Hunters. This is another film that a lot of other sites, this, and I think it was Box Office Pro, had K-pop at the number 2 or number 3 spot, yet this film came in well beneath that number. It came in, I think, around $5.3 million, and so not nearly anywhere as high, but all of these films were over-projected in many ways, but even for them, they had Regretting You at the number 4 spot, so no one really had Regretting You as being the number 1 film of the weekend. Now again, the numbers are still not all that great for it. It's only made $50.8 million, but this is a strong enough second weekend where now profitability is at the very least on the table, if not even very likely to happen, right? So Regretting You has definitely changed its stars, as it were, with a strong second weekend hold. The numbers are also very good. Even though it didn't get first place, it's still good for Black Phone 2, right? This film still made $8 million in its third weekend of release, and it dropped only 38%. So it's a very strong hold. Some were asking, could we see better holds for films like Black Phone 2 because of the Halloween Friday showing and obviously the Halloween weekend? Definitely seems like it benefited from that, dropping only 38%. Its total domestic now is up to $61 million, and we can now officially say this film has made profit and is adding to it. It's made about $6 million in net profit as of the current state of its release, and so just going to continue to add to that over the course of its run. Probably not going to be the biggest of box office returns necessarily, but hey, definitely a good sign for this film that initially didn't seem like it would be holding up to the original film's success, at least based off of the reviews and based off of the reactions from fans, but doesn't really seem that the more mixed reaction from some people, at least when it comes to this film. I personally was a fan of it myself, but I understand why anyone was critical of the film, especially fans of the original. The original is still a lot better in many different ways. The fact, though, remains the film is still pretty much on par with where the first film was, even when you account for things like inflation, the only difference being the budget being that much higher, not by too much, but by enough to where the overall profits are going to be a lot lower for this movie than for the last film. But hey, overall, that seems like a win for them. Also, we have the second weekend of Chainsaw Man, right? This is an anime that came out last weekend. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. It's definitely on my list of things to check out because I've heard so many positive things. Apparently had a very, very small budget, has made $30 million here domestically. This film also had, again, for an anime film, which are very front-loaded movies here domestically, a 67% drop is definitely better than what some had been initially anticipating, right? If you go over to Box Office Theory, he was thinking a 74% drop in its weekend, and then if you go over to even that of Box Office Report, they had the number at around a 60% drop, so they actually were expecting it to be a little bit of a better hold, but again, 67% drop is not the worst that we've seen from an anime's opening weekend, and overall, it's actually it's pretty solid for the kind of film, right? The anime genre, as it were, because of just how front-loaded those films tend to be. So again, did better than expected there in that way. Then you had Begonia, which came up from 14 to number 4, and people are thinking, 576% increase. Well, yeah, when your film's only at like a handful of screens and then you add over 2,000, that's going to make a difference just based off of just the rules and logic of, having more access to a film, having more eyeballs when you go up to a theater and say, oh, there's a film there called Begonia. Oh, that's a newer film. Let me see if I can check that out. Just like a service area level, right? If you have a larger service area, there's more chance of things to hit. If you have more screens for a movie, there's more likely for you to have ticket purchases for those films too. So Begonia saw an increase there, but still also not the biggest of box office releases either. Back to the Future, currently in the number 5 spot. Again, they're not including the numbers for K-pop at this point in time. Let me go ahead and see if I can update that. So we're still waiting on the K-pop numbers to come in this chart, but it has been reported elsewhere around 5.3. The initial estimates were around 6 million, so it's coming in a little underneath that, which is a bit surprising to be honest, but still, the fact that Back to the Future is even anywhere close to the top 5 when it's been out for, as you can see, over 2,100 weekends because the film came out 40 years ago. That's just impressive to say the very least. One of my favorite films of all time. Springsteen biopic dropped 57%. That's a pretty steep drop for a newer film. Made it only $16 million so far. This film right now projected to be a box office loss. Tron Ares still looking towards loss. A new film from Briarcliff called Stitchhead. I've heard good things about it. It's like a horror film for kids, like a Frankenstein film for kids. Very limited release though, so overall not great numbers there, but again, a lot less is known about that movie overall, so as far as profitability is concerned, still going to wait on that one. Good Fortune, 55% drop in the third weekend of release, is starting to leave theaters quite a bit. One Battle After Another dropped 50%. This film is still out in some theaters, though it lost quite a bit of them in this film. Still a massive loss for Warner Brothers. Yeah, the argument is that, it's going to get them awards consideration, but that does not make up money. of which they are over $100 million in the red for that particular movie. So that rounds out the top 10. Let's go to individual releases here. Regretting You is at $50.8 million. Again, not the biggest of box office releases in the world, but this is one that they probably expected to get a little bit more from, right? So you have Mason, is it Thames or Mason Thames, right, who is in the film. He's mostly known by many for as, the young lead in the first Black Phone film. He's more of a side character, unfortunately, in Black Phone 2, which is one of the reasons why I have issues with the movie. But he's also the live-action Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon. So a pretty, well-known face at the very least. Someone that maybe the studio thought might be able to bring in some of the younger audiences, some of the teenage audiences potentially as well. You have McKenna Grace, who's probably most well known for her work in the Ghostbusters remakes, right, of more recent memory, Ghostbusters Afterlife, etc. So this is, again, a pairing that they were probably thinking was going to bring in a lot more. Also, they put on there the It Ends With Us label, right? Because that was the last book that, rather the same author of that book was also a part of the writing of Regretting You. And so maybe they thought that was a good thing. Maybe the whole lawsuit with Blake Lively and the director of It Ends With Us might have maybe tainted that genre a little bit. Who knows? But ultimately, again, probably not the numbers that they were expecting, but good enough for them with a much more manageable budget to have the potential now, because of its strong second weekend hold, actually have now a chance of making profit, right? As of last weekend, this film was not tracking in that direction. But hey, only just takes a good second weekend, and that changes your stars, and that's exactly what seems to be happening for Regretting You. We'll get into that when we get to the charts in just a little bit. Black Phone 2 has made over $100 million globally at this point in time, and as I said before, it is seemingly tracking, at the very least at the domestic level, pretty strong, at the very least pretty comparable to that of the first Black Phone. Now, for some reason, every time I switch it over to the adjustment for inflation, it doesn't really update it, and it gives me that error message. But even with adjustment for inflation not being accounted for, we're talking very close numbers, right? 61 million by the third Sunday for this current film versus the original 62 million. So even if you adjust for 3 years worth of inflation, you're maybe adding a few $1,000,000 potentially to that first category. That's still a very, very close number. And so kudos to them for a film that has, again, not been universally praised, especially by fans of the first movie even. I think that says quite a bit. Now, again, much larger budget compared to what it was, right? So adjustment for inflation, it's like a $10 million increase in budgetary value there. So it's definitely not going to be as profitable as the first Black Phone, but the fact that it's still pacing to maybe get somewhere close to the total global box office of the first film, hey, that is definitely something worthy of talking about there. And then Springsteen, again, a film that I had no idea was even coming out until last weekend when I did my box office coverage for it. Yeah, not looking all that great for that movie at this point in time. But anyway, let's go over to charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. And as you can see, we have some other films that were not mentioned there because they weren't really high on the list. But first off, Shelby Oaks, that's right, the Chris Stuckman film, has now hit its second weekend of release. And so we can make some projections now. So as of this weekend, it has $4 million in total. So we're projecting the film will make somewhere between $5 and $8 million. Obviously, as a smaller budgeted movie, more independent film, the chances of it, hitting that minimum maximum projection is not as likely, just meaning that if it makes a lot less or a lot more, it makes more sense, right? Those indie films tend to follow their own rules, but as of right now, it seems to be following a bit more of a traditional trajectory there. So again, not looking like it's going to make that much more. I think that they were expecting this film to make a little bit more. Think about Chris Stuckman, especially as having the massive YouTube channel that he has. I think that it's once again proof positive that just because you have a lot of followers on social media does not mean that people are actually going to see your movie, right? If even half of the audience of Chris Stuckman had actually gone to see this film paying full price, we probably would have seen much higher numbers than what we are currently seeing here. Again, that's just, not including just general horror fans that would have seen it anyway or anything like that, right? People being driven out just because they want to support Chris Stuckman and his directorial debut, etc. Again, the numbers I don't think are as impressive as they were thinking. Now, the film, again, the budget is kind of all over the place. It's as low as $1.3, $1.5 million, or as high as $2.5 to $3 million. So just assuming, let's say, an average of $2 million, hey, it's made its money back at this point in time and will likely make a couple of $1 million, right? $2 to $3 million. As I said, I don't think that's as high as they were maybe hoping the film to be, but hey, a profit is a profit for your first movie. I will give kudos where kudos are due, but also at the same time, be honest and say, I think they were probably expecting this to be a little bit of a better performer here in October, especially. Springsteen at $30.5 million, currently at $67 million in the red. Based off of the current trajectory, it's looking like this film's going to end around $50 million in the red by the end of its run because of a $55 million budget. After 2 weekends, it's made only about $30 million. So that means that it's going to, in total, make between $43 and $61 million at the global box office. Regretting You in a much better scenario, as I'd mentioned, right? It started off very slow at only $28 million. Reaching $50 million this weekend, it means that we can project the film will make somewhere between $72 and $101 million. So again, not the most money in the world, but remembering the budget was only about $30 million, we do project the film will most likely make some profit. Now again, not very high. As you can see, on the low end, it still loses money. But the fact that a film that was tracking towards being a box office loser in the most likely scenario to now having the much stronger likelihood, right? The average performance, if this follows an average performing movie historically, will likely still be in the profitability territory is a huge swing in their favor. And I think definitely a good sign, right? Currently $20 million in the red, so it still has a ways to go, but it's definitely in a much better position today than it was last weekend. Again, just shows you second weekends can make up quite a difference. We'll continue to track that film over the course of its release. Finishing things off, we have Black Phone 2, right? $104 million there. It's in its third weekend of release, and so as of this weekend, it's now $6.1 million in net gain profits. Tron Ares only at $133 million, still $206 million in the red. Just, again, abysmal numbers there for that film. Roofman still in the red as well. Smashing Machine still $65 million in the red. And then jumping ahead to One Battle After Another, which is still about $143 million in the red. So even though percentage-wise, it's almost doubled its box office compared to its first couple weekends, which again on paper is definitely a stronger total box office run, because they just spent so much money on this movie and are guaranteeing Leonardo DiCaprio especially a large portion of box office receipts. They really shot themselves in the foot in a lot of ways, and so this film is going to end as a massive loss for them. In a year where Warner Brothers has had some of the better box office performing movies, this is, I think, a big scar on their record. But anyway, those are the numbers currently as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Are there other films on here that maybe I did not mention? Obviously, I don't have coverage of a lot of the animes that get released because their budgets are not always known, and then even then it's harder to track because they get early released in their country of origin where they tend to do a lot better. So it's harder to do tracking on that and really to understand exactly how much profit they're getting, because I don't know how much a Japanese movie released in Japan gets back as far as return on investment, what the split is between the theaters there and the studios, because they obviously have different standards than we would here. What I can say obviously is, using our current standard, that this film is doing very, very well, comparatively speaking, right? To be a top 3 film 2 weekends in a row is definitely something that's worthy of praise, and I'm sure Sony, as a distributor of the film here in the North American market, is very happy with the numbers that are indeed coming in for the film. But again, that is one that, if you're wondering why that's not in the chart, that is the reason why. So let me know your thoughts about these and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure that you smash that like button, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed All Souls Day. Or if you follow the traditional calendar, All Souls Day will be moved to tomorrow. Again, great opportunity for us to make some soul cakes. Look that up. Delicious treats that you can make yourself, and to pray for our lost loved ones. And I will be praying for all of yours. And you know what? In the comment section, if you want me to pray for anyone in your life that you have lost, please let me know their name in the comments below, and I'd be happy to pray for them. You guys are awesome. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now let me give a shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illick, Hail to you, Father. And also to Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. She is very lovely, great, awesome Catholic faith-based content over there. You'll also find over on Subscribestar, my member Matt317. He is on Twitch with the same channel name, Matt317. Shout out to you, good sir. And also to a longtime member here, Mr. Roy, my Chosen of Valhalla member here on YouTube. Mr. Roy, thank you for always hanging out and for always being a part of this channel. It does mean a lot, as well as it does for all of my Chosen of Valhalla members. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream or video, or if you want it listed in that list that was playing just before, just now, check out the top link in the video description below. You'll find out how to get those types of shoutouts at the end of every live stream and video. Not to mention, you get access to bonus video content and also access to a Discord server where there are a couple of channels on there where I do giveaways every single month. In fact, I do multiple giveaways every single month. I try to make it so that I'm giving away Blu-rays and 4Ks that make up at least 4 or 5 different giveaways. Sometimes I have to put them in all towards the very end because back in the school session, of course, now means that I'm going to be a little bit more delayed there. So if you want access to things like that, if you want access to a great community, you guys seriously are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.